We're here in Entebbe, Uganda for the 8th African Population Conference by UAPS. We're joined by Professor Nyovani Madise, Director of Research and Head of Office in Malawi, AFIDEP office. And we have Senior Translation Scientist in Nairobi, AFIDEP, Dr. Bernard Onyango. They've been part of the scientific committee for the conference, preparing for this. It's normally held every 4 years, has very high-level scientific contributions from people who have been in this field for quite a while. Policymakers, donors, governments are all involved. So it's a really significant conference to our work, especially on population and health. And so we just want you to tell us briefly about your roles in the scientific committee and how you see the program contributing to this conversation on ICPD 25 and beyond.
Okay, I can start. Yeah. So first of all, maybe to say that both of us, our roles were particularly in the scientific program and making sure that the sessions and the papers actually contributed to the overall theme, which was the harnessing the demographic dynamics of the continent. I was the scientific chair of the conference, or I still am, I should say. And in doing that, I was accompanied by a team of very good colleagues, including Bernard, and then also others from other institutes in UAPS. So maybe for me, the biggest thing was to actually make sure that the scientific integrity of the conference was actually upheld, and that the papers were actually speaking to the theme. I don't know what you thought, Bernard, in terms of our preparation and our selection and thinking for the conference.
Yeah, I think the conference came at a very opportune time. Coming 25 years since the Cairo conference on the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo. And also, interestingly enough, shortly after we had the dates for this particular conference, the decision was made to have the ICPD 25, so that's 25 years since Cairo in Nairobi. So one of the things we had to do was to see how we could make sure that the contributions to the conference would be aligned to the ICPD big program. And so a lot of thinking went into that. But I wanted to also, earlier you pointed out to this being a conference where you have researchers, very experienced researchers and all that. The other bit about the conference is it also aims to incentivize young upcoming researchers and also expose them to what's going on in the field. And so part of making sure that we are having the right people coming to the conference, we also try to make sure that we get young people in the program, both as oral speakers in the oral sessions, but also in the poster sessions, which are usually, probably even a better space to express your work than in the oral sessions, which are usually much shorter. Yeah. And so I think maybe, Nyovani, one thing that's, going forward would be interesting to see how people, because usually there's a feeling that maybe the poster sessions are a notch down, but it's actually an excellent opportunity to be able to share your work and to learn from the colleagues who come to see those posters.
Absolutely. No, you're so right. I have, attended poster sessions where I was actually presenting a poster in not necessarily this conference, but in other previous conferences where I've actually gained much because I've had half an hour of people asking questions and talking to me, which was really great. And in the sessions, the regular sessions, the oral sessions, you have 15 minutes. And if you are lucky towards the end, there are a few questions. But normally we overrun because researchers, as researchers, we really like to talk and talk and talk, and then we eat in the time. Another point that I thought we should mention is the fact that UAPS prides itself in bringing policymakers and researchers and practitioners together. So sometimes this can be seen as not such a good thing, because when you're trying to also speak to practitioners and policymakers, you can't speak in the same way you'd speak to your fellow researchers. So I have already heard somebody said, oh, there are too much sessions on interventions on how to do things. But for me, I'm thinking, good, it's high time as a continent, and as demographers and population scientists, we started drilling down to the things that really matter. How can we use the evidence we have gained and the research we're doing? How can we use that for actually practicable solutions for the continent?
How many sessions on demographic dividend are there in the program, and what does this mean for the work we've been doing around this at AFIDEP and contribution to the global conversation and hopefully commitments, investments towards harnessing the DD?
Do you have the numbers?
No, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at Ben.
Actually, so I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think that there are quite a number of sessions, and this was quite deliberate. This is the first African Population Conference happening since the African Union made this commitment in 2017 to have the theme of the year around the demographic dividend, and a lot of work has been done since in different spaces by researchers, by the policymakers, practitioners, and so this was a good time to just come back to and reflect on what has been done and where to move next. And I think I've been in a number of sessions. I had the opportunity to also be a discussant in one of the sessions on the demographic dividend and prioritizing action. I was in another session also very related. We are going to have a panel that sort of brings the practitioners and even young people on the demographic dividend. I think the message is clear. Everybody has this notion about demographic transition and the changing population age structure. How can it be used as an opportunity to advance socioeconomic development in Africa? And now what we are grappling with are the challenges in operationalizing how we actually tap into that potential. And it's been a big topic during this particular meeting, and even in the ICPD meeting 1 week ago. So hopefully we are going to have some new insights that emerge out of this conference that help us to advance the agenda.
Yeah. In fact, one of the new insights that I think we should consider seriously as AFIDEP is Professor Wolfgang Loth's recommendation that actually when you look at the age structure and education, you actually get a much bigger dividend by focusing on the education. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't focus on reducing fertility and getting more working age population relative to dependence, but he was just saying that if you actually amplify that by providing quality education, secondary education and higher, then you get a much bigger dividend than without emphasizing education. So his assertion is that this is really about an education dividend. So that's something that we're going to take away and look at, and look at it from a scientific point of view, rather than just saying, okay, let's join the bandwagon and do it. It makes sense, just thinking about it, but we also need to be able to do our own analysis and to think about the messaging, how we can actually tell policymakers and practitioners, and what's the level of education that actually optimizes the dividend.
Okay.
So actually, just to add on, I think one of the things that the conference also has tried to do, or what we try to do in the program, is to make sure that we're also looking at contributions that are going to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, which we have the SDGs 2030, and that's a good anchor point because we also allow decision makers to have some timelines which are not too far in the horizon to start thinking seriously about what kind of investments they need to do now. The good thing about the Sustainable Development Goals, you have some targets, there are some indicators that are already identified. There are a lot of indicators, yes, but we can start with the ones that we do have data and evidence on a number of them. Let us start making some progress on those indicators, even as we think about, especially for African countries, defining some really critical indicators of how to measure progress on issues around, for example, climate change, which is going to be a critical development issue over the next couple of decades for the continent.